What's going on, guys? Indy here with Ultimate Tool Reviews. Now we are starting a new year, 2023 right now, and of course if you've purchased any new tools over the past couple holiday deals we've had over the last almost 2 months now, you might have some old tools now that you want to get rid of somehow. So of course there's many ways to sell your tools. No one really offers like a trade-in on tools. I'm surprised Home Depot or Lowe's doesn't really do that. I think that was a kind of a thing. I think I might have heard that in the past, that being an actual thing, but it doesn't really happen anymore. Haven't heard any instances of any brands really doing that. Now, the best 3 ways to sell tools, in my opinion, that I've used in the past are, I'm going to go from kind of the easiest, but you won't get the most amount of money, to the more difficult, but you'll get more money from that. So I'll start all the way at the easiest, and that's going to be probably pawn shops. So, of course, pawn shops, you might have a couple of where you're at. If you're in a larger city like where I'm at in Orlando here, I've got literally hundreds of pawn shops to choose from. And all you got to do is really take in the tool you want to sell, set it on the counter, and most of them have you, show your ID, and they'll give you a price for it and pay you in cash right then and there, and you're good to go. Now, of course, they're in the business to make money, and they're not going to give you the most amount of money you're going to get from that tool. I would say most tools I take into a pawn shop are going to be tools that I don't really feel like selling, and I just want to kind of, get rid of them out of my garage fast, maybe not in the best condition, but a pawn shop will still buy them. I usually get between 20 and 60 bucks depending on the tool. It's not great, what you can get for the amount of money for it, but it's still something. You get rid of the tool, you can get the cash for it, and you're on your way pretty quick. And common tools that I sell at pawn shops are maybe a tool that I had that really got beat up, or a corded tool seems to sell really easily at pawn shops. I like to buy those. But of course, they're going to sell that tool for anywhere between 2 to 3 times what you sold it to them for. So just be aware of that, of course. Now, I will say when it comes to pawn shops, you got to be careful which ones you go to. Some will give you less, some will give you more. I will say the easiest way to discover which pawn shops are best for selling off tools are going to be pawn shops that don't have a lot of tools in them. And this is just from my experience. The pawn shops that buy a lot of tools, they're not necessarily interested in buying more tools. If they've already got plenty on the shelves, they've got a huge tool section, they're not really going to care so much about buying more tools. The pawn shops that seem to buy the most tools around me offer me the least amount of money. The pawn shops that have almost no tools anywhere, they're looking to buy more tools and restock their shelves, so they'll have to offer you a little bit more, maybe 10, 20 bucks more, and that's kind of where I like to go to sell off my tools. And the final thought about pawn shops is kind of where I like to sell off my tools that I might have a bit of a difficulty selling anywhere else. Maybe it's too large to ship. Maybe there's not a huge market for that tool. Like if you're selling off maybe like a tile cutter and there's not really a lot of tile work being done in your area right now, you might have a little bit of a hard time selling that tool, but a pawn shop should still buy that no problem. And one little secret tip I've got about pawn shops, if you've got a drawer full of chargers that you don't always use, maybe they're brand new still, a number of pawn shops around my area will buy chargers from me for 10 bucks a piece. So if I were to buy, a kit here, a kit there, I've got some, 2, 3, 4, 5 chargers laying around. They just offer me 10 bucks a charger and I'm on my way. They're brand new, of course. I don't need that many. So that's another little tip you can do as well too. If you just want to get rid of some of that stuff that you have sitting around, pawn shops will often buy a lot of the stuff you have. As long as it's somewhat useful to them, they will still give you cash for it. Now, I will say this is kind of a close, between, I would say, Facebook and eBay. Now, Facebook can kind of be in the same realm as other services like OfferUp. There's a ton of those apps out there. I'm not going to get into those. I'm kind of just going to go into Facebook as the major one really to get into. And that's going to be, of course, selling things locally. I do a lot of that. I've been a big eBay guy for the last 10 years now. However, I prefer Facebook to eBay a little bit more because I feel like I can sell my tools a bit faster. And I'm, of course, not paying shipping fees. I'm not worrying about, packaging my tool to sell it. And, of course, I'm not worrying about the, rather high eBay fees as well, too. Facebook is just free to sell. And I've never really had a bad experience on Facebook. I probably sell 2 to 3 things a week on Facebook. I'm always getting stuff that I can resell on Facebook, and I have a great time doing it. And I will say, some people negotiate on Facebook a little bit. I've got some guys who are just like, I post a tool on there, someone message me an hour later, say I'll take it, hand me cash, and they're on their way. Now, you don't have to worry about things on eBay where people, they don't know what they're buying. They're like, oh, that didn't come with a battery and charger, even though you clearly state tool only, and I've had that happen before. And they're like, where's the battery and charger? But you clearly showed that there is no battery and charger with it, as well as they can test it out before they buy it when they're coming to pick it up. So that's kind of why my Facebook is right in my in-between there of, not getting the most amount of money, but also, getting the tool sold relatively fast. You can kind of balance out how much money you get, as well as also selling that tool at a reasonable time frame as well. So Facebook has always been kind of one of my favorites. I don't really buy tools on Facebook myself too much. I can always kind of find something, at a pawn shop myself or a deal somewhere online. I'll generally sell tools on Facebook that are on the larger side, like maybe like a circular saw. You could still ship that on eBay, but it's not really going to be as cost, prohibitive as being able to just sell it on Facebook and not to worry about shipping at all. Now, of course, we've got eBay. That is a big place to buy and sell tools. I buy on eBay way more than I sell, I will say that. I'm not a huge fan of shipping stuff out. The eBay fees are always expensive, and you never know who that buyer is going to be. If they're going to like, the condition, no matter how good of photos you take of that item, there's always going to be some type of issue there. Of course, when it comes to selling on eBay, remember all the fees you're going to get. Now, you can, of course, get top dollar for your tools most of the time, but if the tool is not super common, if it's easy to ship, you can definitely get more money than you could on Facebook. You've got a much larger buying pool there of people that are going to buy that item from you. You're going to get much more views on eBay as well too. But of course, I like to stay balanced between Facebook and eBay, depending on what I'm selling. I will say I do now sell a lot more on Facebook just because I don't need to worry about shipping, don't need to worry about all the fees now. So that's kind of my preference. So I'll give you an example. Let's say maybe you're upgrading your drill and impact this year. And let's say your drill and impact now is maybe hitting, maybe let's say 6-7 years old now. My recommendation is sell that. If it's going to be one of the larger brands like Makita, Milwaukee, DeWalt, at that point, you're probably looking at being between, $40 to $100 of value you could have in that tool now. I would probably just say take it to a pawn shop, get the 40, 50, 60 bucks they might give you, and be done with it. If you sell it on Facebook or eBay, you might get between maybe 50 to 100 or so. You might get, maybe 20, 30 bucks more, but I would say, just take it to the pawn shop, be one and done with it. Don't waste a bunch of time, with people. Is this still available? Is this still available on Facebook, of course? When it's kind of in that price range, I like to just, pawn shop it and move on from there. It might not be worth the extra, maybe $20 to $40 you're going to get, but the ton of extra time you're now going to spend on trying to sell that tool. Now, let's talk about brands, for example, here. Some brands will sell much better than the other brands out there. So the brands I've noticed that sell the absolute worst are Metapo HPT, Ryobi, Rigid, Porter Cable, any of the Harbor Freight brands. They always sell the worst, and mostly because they're already relatively affordable brands and they're not really that heavily used. If you go into like the Makita, Milwaukee, DeWalt brands, I will say DeWalt, being one of the most common brands out there, sells the absolute easiest. I love DeWalt tools when you go to sell them because they're super easy to sell, followed by Milwaukee, and then finally third place would be Makita. So anything Milwaukee, DeWalt, if you're looking to pick up a new brand, I always recommend DeWalt and Milwaukee because they're relatively easy to sell. So if you buy a tool and you buy the latest, the greatest tool, and you like to have the best tools, say 6 months on the line, there's a new tool out now that's now the better tool, you can sell off your DeWalt or Milwaukee tools relatively easily. And I will say, whenever I buy Milwaukee or DeWalt tools, and I get a really good deal on them initially, I often either break even or even sell them for more than I paid for them in the future when I sell it back on Facebook. So that's a really big pro to me. Why is, spend a little bit more money right up front, and then you can of course maybe gain that back quite a bit easier. Kind of the same thing like buying a Toyota or a Honda. They always cost a little bit more up front, but you can always resell them for a bit more when you go to resell them. So something to keep in mind there, and a good tip, if you want to kind of save money overall in your tool buying experience. So guys, I hope this helped you out, kind of understanding, when you go to resell a tool, what options do you have, and what are some of the best options, either get rid of a tool the fastest, like at a pawn shop, or if you want to try to get a little bit more money for those tools, you've got things like Facebook, OfferUp, and of course eBay to resell your tools there. Of course, it's going to be a lot more work. You might have some fees, maybe shipping to do, and of course, you got to keep that stuff in mind when you're going to resell your tools. But of course, the reward there can be worth it, of course, being able to get more money. So guys, take care. Hope you enjoyed the video and have a great 2023.